Sancherberg. The issue of growing childhood obesity is something that exercises doctors, nutritionists and recently celebrity chefs. Jamie Oliver's campaign for healthy school meals generally met with a favourable response, though some children and parents thought they were being preached at. Now, though, the Public Health Minister, Anas Soubry, has claimed that where once poor children were likely to resemble Oliver Twist, now it's more likely to be Billy Bunter. My examples, not hers. Anas Soubry is one of David Cameron's more outspoken ministers. In charge of the public health portfolio, she was castigating the Food and Drink Federation, warning them to cut the amount of fat, sugar and salt in their products or face legislation when she appeared to go off message. When she was young, she said, the most deprived children used to be called skinny runts because they were malnourished. Now, poor children are more likely to be fat because of an abundance of bad food. It was heartbreaking, she said, citing crisps and fizzy drinks and putting parents firmly in the firing line. But is Anas Soubry uttering truths that are unpalatable or attacking people with the least chance of helping themselves? Well, with me now are author and journalist Harry Mount and cardiologist Dr. Aseem Malhotra. Harry Mount, first of all, is she right?
I think the statistics show she's definitely right and should be praised for exposing a truth which, even if it's embarrassing, is true and everyone secretly knows it. But
where does the fault lie? Because it seems that she very much is pointing the finger. And does it lie with the food companies? Does it lie with the supermarkets? Does it lie with parents?
I think it's completely personal choice. I think we all know what's good and what's bad for us. George Orwell made the point brilliantly in Road to Wigan Pier in 1937. He said, if life isn't great, if you're worse off, if you're given the choice between a piece of chocolate and an apple, you'll have the chocolate. It's odder to choose the apple, but it's because the middle class are brilliant at self-denial that they go for the apple.
Is that your take on it?
No, I disagree. I think, first of all, obesity is a problem that is affecting the whole population, not just people from poor backgrounds. 60% of the adult UK population now overweight or obese, and we know that the health consequences of that are pretty staggering. Increase in heart disease, cancers, type 2 diabetes. But actually, I think Anas Soubry's comments were quite counterproductive. I think they're more politically motivated. In fact, what she's actually done is she's given the appearance of stigmatising the poor when she should be concentrating her efforts on the real culprits of obesity, and that's the food industry, in my opinion. They've been allowed to hijack the food environment. We have an oversupply of unhealthy foods everywhere, but also they're able to get away with irresponsible marketing of cheap junk food to vulnerable people. And do you think the
politicians actually, where the fault lies, is that politicians aren't cracking down on food labelling, content and so forth of the big food giants?
I think that's one aspect, but I also think that the marketing of unhealthy foods as well is something that needs to be tackled. Kirsty, I just want to say one more thing, which is, I think, really important. The current government policy is one of voluntary agreement with the food industry. I think that is doomed to failure. It's a failed experiment. We know that the food industry only care about profit. And more importantly than that, what it actually is doing is it's like asking British Petroleum to encourage cycling. It's not going to work.
I think you've got to deal with the fact that it's just true that the first time in the history of human civilization, the richer you are, the thinner you are, and suggest.
Yeah, but let's deal with it. Let's deal with the food companies. Would you not be in favour of much sharper legislation? You know, we've got the idea of traffic lights and so forth, but actually saying there is a certain amount of, you know, a level of salt above which no processed food should go at all.
No, I don't agree with that. I think we should be allowed to eat whatever we want, and people know that these things are bad for them. It's very patronising to suggest that somehow these things are being forced on them, and let me finish.
But sometimes these things are cheaper, and that's trickier for people who do not have the money.
Actually, it's extremely easy to make good food cheaply. A pound of onions costs nothing. It's a choice.
Again, as you were saying, if people are living in really horrific circumstances with horrible places to cook, they don't want to go into a kitchen, do they, and try and prepare a meal on a packet of onions?
No, but they also want to eat bad food. It's personal choice.
I think the problem we have is that because the food environment is full of very unhealthy products, choice becomes an illusion. And when you don't have choice, where's personal responsibility? A lot of these foods actually, interesting, Harry talks about personal responsibility. I think that's absolutely true, but it's more of a political ideology in this aspect. The science tells us, in fact, there are lots of foods there that are marketed as healthy, when in fact they're the complete opposite. A lot of the low-fat products that are loaded with sugar and carbohydrate, where do people have the informed choice there?
You'd actually have to be very clear and actually know about nutrition to know what's in these. And we're not going to talk about which ones they are, but there's certain orange drinks which are branded as, and clearly are branded as being good for you when clearly they aren't. If you're going to make an informed choice, you have to tell people what's in stuff.
Sure, but if you're saying there's no choice, you've got to accept that there are people who are making the choice. The richer you get, the more likely you are to take that choice. So actually the conclusion of that argument is suggesting that the poor are incapable of making that choice. I'm saying they're perfectly capable of making that choice. They know exactly what's bad for them and what's good for them in the same way that middle classes do. They choose to eat bad food, and they should be allowed to.
They should be allowed to. So Anna Soubry, actually, although at the beginning of the conversation you said she was very brave to speak out, it's really none of her business.
No, she can. I think it's worth pointing out the fact, because it's just the truth, that the richer you get, the thinner you are, the healthier you eat. But at the same time, people should be allowed to choose what they eat. If they want to get very fat, they should be allowed to. And
if they want to get very fat, they should be allowed to. And where does that put the position of the NHS in terms of...
Well, it's having huge impacts on the NHS. It's costing the obesity-related illnesses, is costing the NHS £5 billion a year. And we know the obesity problem is getting worse. The trends are not getting better. It's only going to have a greater impact. And I don't think this is a problem for the poor. This is a problem for the whole population. As a cardiologist, I treat people with heart disease on a daily basis. And I see, yes, there are people from poor backgrounds who can't afford healthier foods, and that's where the government have to step in. Whether it's subsidising healthy food and taxing unhealthy foods, that would be the right step. But there are people from very affluent backgrounds who have poor diets, who have heart disease, heart attacks, survive them, and then say to me, you know, Doc, I wish that I had known so much more about my food or the impacts it was having on my health. So government has to intervene. And the other thing that's really important is, if we learn from history, the most important public health advances happened through regulation, whether it's safe drinking water, smoke-free buildings, not cosy voluntary agreements with the guilty industries.
I think the problem is people like bad food in the same way they like drink and they like cigarettes, and to tax those is to be a selective tax on the poor.
Thank you both very much indeed. Tomorrow morning's front pages, we talked about the Telegraph a little earlier. Merkel hits at deal for Cameron. The Guardian, let's talk, says Merkel, as Cameron gambles on EU. And the apocalyptic threat posed by antibiotic resistance there on the right-hand side of the page. The Daily Mail, as EU referendum speech unites Tories, delights business, and even gets Germany on side. The resounding verdict, at least in the Daily Mail, is yes, Prime Minister, now go and finish the job. The Times, a marvel of technology, that top story there, the helping hand, this is a new hand, this is the advance of science. And moving to the bottom of the page, Business backs PM's call for a mandate on Europe. The Independent, handbagged, Cameron's promise of EU referendum by 2017 provokes a storm of controversy. The Financial Times, Cameron stirs Tory passions with huge gamble on EU referendum. On the left-hand side, Watchdog investigates ICAP over LIBOR fixing. And finally, in the Daily Express, they go for a completely different story. They say killer freeze to get worse, 6 inches of snow and minus 20 degrees on the way. Well, that's all from us tonight. Join us again tomorrow. From all of us here, eat well, sleep well. Good night.